After walking into yet another half-empty arena, Io Wilson shifted the blame directly onto Caitlin Clark and the fans she brought with her. Her frustration was loud and clear. Clark's absence from the finals left a gaping hole in both the energy and the economics of the game. Meanwhile, ticket prices plummeted and social media lit up with images of ghost town arenas, mocking the league's earlier claims of historic growth.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
But Wilson's finger-pointing only highlights a truth the WNBA has avoided. The system wasn't built to last. A marketing strategy based on one player, without nurturing rivalries or building consistent fan investment, was never going to survive the postseason. With Wilson now vocalizing what the empty seats already said, the league finds itself exposed. Not because Clark isn't here, but because no one else was built up to take her place. Io Wilson's meltdown lit up the sports world, not for the play she made, but for the blame she tried to pass. After Game 2 of the WNBA Finals, arenas sat sparsely filled, ticket prices plunged, and the finals, which were supposed to be the league's grandest stage, ended up feeling hollow. And Wilson publicly pinned much of the blame on one person, Caitlin Clark. Wilson's claim? That Clark and Indiana Fever fans bore responsibility for the lackluster turnout. That without Clark's presence, the energy vanished. That the league's narrative of thriving viewership and growth was a house built on sand. Her words were blunt, and in doing so, she put the league's worst fears on full display. Because the truth behind Wilson's outburst is far more alarming than fan absence. It's about exposure, the kind of exposure that comes when your league leans too heavily on a single star and forgets to build anything else beneath it. From Game 2 onward, the optics were brutal. Final rounds of the league meant to be ascending, played in half-empty buildings. Tickets going for pennies compared to what was promised. Enthusiasm that seemed to evaporate overnight. Social media flooded with images of row after row of vacant seats. Memes comparing ticket prices to fast food. Derisive comments. Fans shrugging. Viewership plummeting. This was supposed to be the payoff, the moment when all the talk about growth, about mainstream legitimacy, about women's basketball moving into a new era, would show itself. Instead, it felt like a soft landing gone wrong. Wilson's reaction was visceral. She tried to redirect the spotlight entirely. She accused Clark's absence of causing this mess. She accused Fever fans of abandoning the finals. But in doing so, she confirmed what many critics had already suspected. The league's momentum was tied more tightly to Clark than anyone wanted to admit. Clark was magnetic all season. She changed the conversation. She filled seats, broke viewership records, moved merchandise, and created headlines. She became not just a star, but a cultural force. And the league leaned into that, marketed her, amplified her, celebrated her. But there was no plan for after. No fallback. No buffer. No secondary narrative that could carry the weight when she wasn't in the picture. So as soon as the Fever were out or Clark was sidelined, the rest of the league looked empty. Without Clark, there was no tension, no must-see rivalry. No narrative framing that made finals compelling to casual viewers. The league poured energy into image, into public relations, into the hype, but it didn't build storytelling, drama, or sustained engagement. It didn't create stakes. It didn't build rivalries. It didn't build the kind of narrative arcs fans could latch onto beyond Clark himself. So when Clark wasn't on the floor, much of the hype vanished. The finals suddenly felt like they were being played in a vacuum. Spectacular athletes, sure, but missing the connective tissue of narrative, anticipation, and emotional investment. That's what Wilson's accusations underscored. She wasn't just upset about attendance. She was reacting to being at the center of a failure she didn't cause. She was trying to salvage credibility, pointing at Clark as the villain in her story. But the blame doesn't lie there. The blame lies in leadership. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert and league executives kept insisting everything was healthy. They spoke of record viewership, growth, expanding reach. Yet the scoreboard didn't agree. Empty seats, and cratering ticket values told their own story. Their public optimism clashed with on-the-ground reality. That disconnect eroded trust. The league's messaging prioritized image over substance. They pushed highlights over narratives. They sold metrics over experiences. They leaned heavily on the Clark effect, but didn't invest enough in creating the infrastructure to sustain interest after her presence diminished. This finals collapse doesn't just hurt optics, it threatens the league's economic foundation. The timing is brutal. As players prepare for collective bargaining negotiations, demanding higher salaries, better benefits, greater investment in development, owners and broadcasters now have a weapon. Look at these finals, they'll say. Look at the empty seats. Look at the weak engagement. Why should we commit more when the marquee event can't draw? It's a convenient argument, one bolstered by Wilson's own public meltdown. By trying to place blame on Clark and fans, Wilson may have given the powers that be cover. She may have deflected criticism away from management, marketing failures and strategic miscalculations, and toward a scapegoat. It's easier for leadership to claim, "We lost our draw star," than admit they never built a wider foundation. That said, Wilson's criticism also reflects her own frustration. She's in the finals. She's fighting. She expects energy. She expects investment. And she saw a finals that looked like mid-season basketball. No buzz. No shot clock urgency in the stands. No roar from the crowd. That must sting for a player, for a league, for the narrative they've been trying to construct. But none of that gives Wilson license to misplace blame. She directed her frustration inwardly instead of upward, at the very person whose brilliance elevated the league, rather than questioning why the league couldn't stand in her absence. The finals lacked drama. No heated rivalries. No surprise storylines. No iconic clashes. That absence made the series feel like filler. Fans who aren't hardcore expect tension. They expect risk. They expect narratives. And the league delivered none. Without Clark, it felt like background noise. This isn't to diminish Wilson or the Aces. They're elite athletes. They deserve to compete on a stage worthy of their skill. But in that moment, Wilson sounded like someone defending a facade, not a foundation. She sounded like someone realizing the structure behind the stadium was shaky, and instead of holding leadership accountable, she turned on the spotlight. Clark wasn't the crutch. She was the catalyst. But the league treated her like a crutch anyway. And now, when that crutch is removed, the beauty collapses. The league is a crossroads. They can stick with the veneer, keep spinning metrics, keep promoting images, keep insisting that all is well. Or they can admit this finals showed them what everyone already suspected. They overinvested in one name and forgot to build the league. They need to build narratives, rivalries, star depth, marketing that doesn't start and end with Clark. They need to invest in stories beyond box scores. They need to make tournament moments compelling even when headlines are elsewhere. The fallout will be real. When negotiations come, when budgets are drawn, when broadcasters measure returns, this finals won't be forgotten. It will be referenced. It will be held up as evidence. And the league's leadership will bear responsibility for the mismatch between promise and performance. Wilson's meltdown, in that sense, was a cry for help disguised as an attack. She pointed at Clark because she needed a target, because she saw the sprawl of failure waiting behind her. But she misdirected. The problem isn't Clark. The problem is the league's inability to protect its momentum, to spin a future beyond a single star, to invest in an ecosystem of story and engagement. The finals have shown that without Clark, the league is fragile. Without compelling narratives, the product won't carry itself. Without genuine connection, fans won't stay. And if leadership continues to cling to image over substance, they'll risk losing everything real that they've built. So what do you think? Was Wilson justified in pointing the finger, or did she misdiagnose the problem? Does the WNBA finals collapse show deeper structural cracks in the league? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and be sure to subscribe for more honest takes on the stories shaping women's basketball. Aya Wilson's meltdown is a signal flare, one that's lighting up everything the WNBA was trying to hide. It's raw, it's messy, and it's painfully revealing about how fragile their fantasy really was. We've seen her defensiveness. We've heard the words blaming Caitlin Clark and Fever fans. But what's more striking is what Wilson didn't say, namely, that the league failed her. That nobody built this moment to last without a single spark plug. That while she's fighting for a title, the foundation beneath her is shaking. From the first whistle of Game 2 to the final buzzer, the finals looked wrong. It looked empty. It sounded hollow. The product was still stellar. Elite athletes, high stakes, championship drive, but the platform around it cracked. Rows of empty seats. Ticket prices so low they became punchlines. Social media flooded with jokes, criticism, and disbelief. This was the WNBA's moment to prove it had arrived. To prove it could carry weight beyond one breakout star. To show that the hype was real, that momentum was built to last. Instead, it looked like a high-wire act performed without a net. Wilson's reaction may have been born of frustration, but it felt reactive. It felt like her instinct was to fight the media narrative rather than challenge the infrastructure that created it. To take aim at Clark, someone who isn't even there, she deflected attention from executives, marketers, league leadership, and strategy. She deflected from the fact that the league never seemed to build depth of interest beyond Clark. Clark didn't fail the league. The league failed itself. Because star power only gets you so far. It creates bursts of excitement. It drives headlines. But sustainable growth? That comes from layering stories, creating tension, developing rivalries, ensuring fans feel emotionally invested in more than just one roster. Clark was the magnet. She pulled fans closer. The league celebrated that. But they didn't multiply it. They didn't use her moment as a launch pad for others. They didn't build the tent bigger. They didn't invest in alternate storylines. The moment she's off the floor, the lights dimmed fast. The finals became the evidence. Without her, the spectacle faltered. Some say the lack of compelling storylines is to blame. Others point to weak marketing. Others to leadership disconnected from fan realities. All of them are correct, and none of them is new. This season's hype was always sitting on top of a shaky narrative. And now the strategy is coming apart in public view. Wilson's words tried to redirect blame. But it's not Clark's fault. She played beyond expectations. She drove interest. She earned the attention. She didn't warp the league. She uplifted it. The league's real problem lies in believing that her presence would fill the gaps that weren't addressed. Promotion, storytelling, production quality, connected engagement, narrative arcs. Leadership chose to push image over authenticity. They pushed metrics over lived experience. They broadcast success without matching the product. Now, the final show lies. The adults are losing credibility. And Wilson's meltdown is the emotional cry of someone positioned at the center of something they didn't build. Fans aren't villains. They didn't abandon the game. They just won't sit in seats when the game isn't pitched as must-see. They won't invest energy in dull scripts. They have choices, and the league gave them none when it counted the most. Wilson's breakdown exposed how much the league's success was tied to illusion, that in their rush to increase viewership, they forgot to build engagement. In their hunger for viral moments, they neglected sustainable storytelling. In their desire to project strength, they ignored weakness. This finals will be a turning point, or a warning sign. The collective bargaining, the next season, the brand deals, the future growth, all are at risk. Owners and broadcasters will seize this collapse. They'll argue weakness in demand. They'll question ROI. They'll push back on higher budgets. Wilson's words gave them justification, but they didn't give a solution. To recover, the league must own this moment. They must admit the weaknesses. They must invite accountability. They must rebuild strategies beyond singular narratives. They need to craft multi-threaded stories. They need promotion that doesn't shatter when one player is sidelined. They need to build a fan base whose relationship to the game doesn't hinge on any one star. And they need to do it fast because the finals were supposed to prove something. Now, they proved something entirely different. How over-reliance and superficial growth unravels. Aya Wilson's meltdown didn't just spark headlines. It detonated a truth the WNBA has been running from. In the wake of Game 2, she stood in front of cameras, looked squarely at her critics, and blamed Caitlin Clark and Indiana Fever fans for the finals' emptiness. She shifted blame from ticketing failures, marketing missteps, and league mismanagement to Clark, the one player who lifted this league into mainstream conversations all season. It was a bold move, one that forced everyone to reckon with where the league's foundation really lies. Let's not mince words. Wilson's words were loaded. She wasn't simply venting frustration. She was weaponizing the narrative. And in doing that, she revealed just how fragile the WNBA's latest growth story truly is. Because Game 2 didn't just underperform, it imploded. Empty seats, slashed ticket prices, disinterest, apathy. What was supposed to be the defining moment of the sport's ascent instead looked like a collapse in progress. And Wilson's reaction to it wasn't outrage at the collapse itself. It was a desperate attempt to redirect it. Why Clark? Because Clark became the lightning rod for attention. She was the magnet that drew in eyes, clicks, revenue, headlines. During the regular season, her presence elevated everything. The league leaned into that. It amplified it. It celebrated it. But it never distributed the weight. When she's not in the picture, that weight falls hard. That's what we saw in the finals. How far the league fell when the main attraction wasn't involved. And Wilson, caught at the epicenter of that fall, lashed out at the spotlight rather than exposing the cracks in the building. She blamed the fans. She blamed Clark's absence. She blamed the energy. She blamed anything but leadership. Because leaders rarely take heat for what they should have fixed before the lights went dim. The truth is, Clark didn't kill the momentum. The league's failure to build anything beyond Clark did. Wilson's attempt to pin blame on Clark exposed how invested the league had become in one narrative. That's not how sustainable growth works. That's how fragile hype is. The optics didn't help. Wilson looked defensive, cornered, reactive. She sounded like someone holding up a house with a single support beam and then yelling at the wind when it loses balance. Her frustration is understandable, but how she addressed it made her look like a scapegoater. Don't misunderstand. Clark had outsized impact. Her draw was real. She changed the narrative. She brought people in. But Wilson pointing fingers at her misplaces responsibility. The league built its springboard on Clark, expecting the ascent to carry itself from there. That was a gamble. It's a gamble every league watches. And in this case, it didn't pay off. This meltdown forced a broader reckoning. It exposed how much of the league's forward story was built on illusion, not infrastructure. It exposed a plan that hinged too hard on one star, without scaffolding for the rest. It revealed how quickly the spotlight fades when the narrative isn't broadened. Wilson's reaction is dramatic. Yes, but it also matters because she's confronting what many skipped. She's surfacing the tension between star dependency and league durability. She's showing how players see it, too. They see the seats go unfilled. They hear fans talk. They watch ticket prices drop. They feel the pulse wane. And then the question falls on leadership. What now? Because the finals aren't just a series, they're a statement. They're a test. And this year, that test failed. If Wilson's meltdown opens the eyes of fans, media, league officials, that's one thing. But if they write it off as championship fatigue or absence of big names, they'll miss the point entirely. The league doesn't lack stars. It lacks balance, narrative depth, sustainable engagement. Every image of empty row seats, social media posts mocking $9 tickets, fans posting saw more people at traffic lights than in the arena. These aren't jokes. They're warnings. They're data points. They're evidence. And Wilson's meltdown just pulled the thread. She's not entirely wrong to be upset. She's contending for a title. She wants energy, stakes, investment. But her reaction aimed at Clark was a misfire. Clark didn't cause the finals to flop. She was someone they built everything around, then forgot to broaden the support. It's on the league now. If they see Wilson's meltdown as an embarrassment, they'll silence it, spin it, deflect it. If they see it as a wake-up call, they'll confront the foundational cracks, rebuild narratives, connect players and fans beyond a single force. Because here's what's clear. Without Clark, the WNBA finals looked like a shell. With Wilson pointing at Clark, she made visible the very emptiness that haunted the series. The momentum they claimed was record-breaking. It wasn't real enough to survive its biggest test. The league's leadership, as they gaze at empty seats and crumbling hype, has a decision to make. Continue leaning on image and hope for viral momentum, or build a structure that stands when the spotlight shifts. Wilson's meltdown didn't fix anything, but it exposed what needs to be. And now no one gets to ignore it. Aya Wilson knows better. She's not just any player. She's a two-time MVP, the face of a championship team, and one of the most talented athletes in the league. She's been through the highs and lows. She's seen what happens when the league gets it right, and when it fumbles. So for her to go on record and point the finger at Caitlin Clark, a rookie who isn't even in the finals, it felt like a distraction, like misdirected frustration from someone watching the house burn and yelling at the person who once lit the stove. Because here's what really happened. The WNBA lit the Caitlin Clark fire, then stood too close without building anything fireproof. And when that flame wasn't there to warm the finals, the cold truth hit hard. Wilson's meltdown wasn't just about empty seats. It was about what they represented. Disinterest, disconnect, disappointment. That's hard to process when you're giving everything on the court, when you're supposed to be at the pinnacle of your sport. But instead of looking up the chain, to the marketing failures, to the leadership that overpromised and underdelivered, she punched sideways. She blamed Clark's fans for not showing up. She blamed the media for making Clark too big. She blamed everyone but the people in charge of selling this league as a movement when all they had was a moment. And let's be real, Clark didn't ask to carry the league. She showed up, balled out, took hits literally, and helped spike ratings. She wasn't in control of how much attention she got. That's on the league. They made her the focal point. They centered entire broadcasts around her. Then they failed to elevate the rest of the cast. So when the finals rolled around and Clark wasn't there, the audience the league had courted all season didn't feel connected to what was left. And you can't blame people for that. You can't yell at a casual viewer for not caring when you never gave them a reason beyond one player. The Aces and Liberty deserved better. They deserved packed arenas, buzzing coverage, and real national momentum. But they didn't get it. Not because Clark was missing, but because the league never invested in them the way it did in her. Wilson's outburst may have been emotional, but it was also telling. It showed us that even the players feel the fragility of this league's foundation. They see the cracks. They feel the weight. But if stars like Wilson want to help fix it, the first step is not blaming each other. It's demanding more from the people running the show. Now it's your turn. Was Aya Wilson calling out Clark fair? Or was it just misdirected heat from a finals that fell flat? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more breakdowns on the real drama behind the game.